All right. Welcome to the study group.
Thank you, Derek.
Welcome everyone at home. Today, we're going to be talking about a pretty fun topic, Morontia, mind, Morontia mota, to the concept of Morontia. And we're titling this Morontia now because it's actually something that we can access now in this life.
Right. It's a revealed reality that we can experience.
So maybe some people aren't really familiar with the term Morontia or mota or anything like that, but it's essentially a super philosophy. We might have a realm of reasoning in our mind that we have in philosophy. Well, Morontia is an expanded framework, an expanded perception of reality, of more reflective of true reality.
Exactly.
That we actually grow into in our soul, into our next existence, in the next realm. But it just so happens that due to revelation, not just the Urantia Book, but also self-auto-revelation.
And Jesus.
And the demonstration of Jesus's life.
Right.
We can access Morontia type of philosophy and thinking is an overlay on our mind, essentially now.
Right. So this first slide with Jesus is describing what we're going to be talking about today. He didn't use the word Morontia, but here he says that the soil of the evolving soul is human and material, but the destiny of this combined creature of mind and spirit is spiritual and divine. So what he's talking about here is combining our material nature with the gift of the spiritual nature. And that creates a new kind of reality, creates a new version of ourselves that we've given the word Morontia as a term for that. But that's, in fact, what he's talking about here in this slide. So it's very touching with this image of Jesus giving sight to Josiah,
right,
giving sight to the blind. And in a way, in that case, he was giving material sight to this man, but he also gives us spiritual insight. So in a way, Jesus, as a demonstration of the combining of the human and the divine, is a revelation. And in that way, he gives us the ability to see our own potential. He gives us sight in a way where we might otherwise be blind. We might not know that we have this potential, but he demonstrated it. He showed it, shows us the way.
And sent a spirit of truth to show us the way.
Exactly, right.
So we can start to see us as he sees us with all that potential. And then it's up to us to actualize that potential.
Right. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And the term that we have for this potential, this fascinating potential, is Morontia, this blending of the physical and the spiritual to create a new kind of reality.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, I like how we're going to get into the topic of mota a little bit, and how we were just talking about having motivation to actualize this stuff, that maybe through inspiration, we gain creative insight.
Right.
With this blending with divinity inside in our mind, we're choosing to blend with God and creative spirit, gain insight, and then manifest it into reality.
As ourselves.
Yes, ourselves in this creative cooperative venture. And now we express something new. We brought something new. And that's the whole thing with like Morontia, is that because you're blending spirit with physical, with material, but you're doing it in the mind, the birth of that process is coming from a higher source.
Right.
And it's creating something new. You're bringing forth something new into this realm. And that's why true art really does kind of tease you into seeing a potential realm that you might experience in the near future or something like that. It expands your framework.
Well, and it produces unexpected outcomes too.
Right.
That you wouldn't necessarily guess from either the, you combine hydrogen, to make water, hydrogen and oxygen.
Right,
you wouldn't have guessed that would make water, right? So you combine the human and the divine, and that brings forward a new sense of ourselves that you wouldn't have guessed, you might not have guessed would even have been possible.
Right.
So when you go forward in life in partnership with God, you discover all these new potentials and possibilities within yourself.
Yeah. How often
you become a new being, in a sense.
Sure. Yeah.
How often lifts off your physical platform.
I hear a lot of people saying that, God showed me something, but there was no way that it was me, that I thought I could do that. No way, God, that's not for me. There's no way. How can I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Even the prophets in the Bible talk about how they had problems speaking publicly.
Mm-hmm.
And then, a couple years down the road, here they are doing it.
Right.
If you have the faith and the trust in the motivation and inspiration that you've been given that is new,
mm-hmm.
and you can act upon that, something very new will happen on this world.
Exactly. And a big part of that is the discovery of love, the discovery of God's love within us. That's what spills over and motivates our desire to serve others. It's like, wow, this is a loving universe and a loving creator. And and this creator lives within me. And the love that I feel is what I want to express and give in whatever way I can. So that's almost a Morontia reality in itself.
Yeah.
The human motivation of love coming from God.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of this is tied up in worship in a sense,
mm-hmm.
because worship being the desire and the act of the one, like me, connecting with the source
mm-hmm.
to serve the whole.
Right.
And that's my intention, is to serve the whole. Well, let's look at it as I'm going to the source of all creativity for inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm withdrawing from the inspiration bank in
mm-hmm.
a loving manner. It's
mm-hmm.
love.
Uh-huh.
And in that loving service that I've now withdrawn, I can now come up with something that I can now share that serves in a creative, loving way.
Right.
Which is new.
And it's original.
It's original and new. I haven't looked for inspiration. Perhaps if I look for inspiration in my own mind, just myself, I might rearrange the pieces that are already on the board in front of me to some clever manner.
Yeah.
But when I bring in new inspiration from spirit, then I'm made a whole different type of board altogether. Like you've changed the whole paradigm.
You're playing on a new level.
Right.
Right. So maybe we can go to the overview.
Okay, yeah. So these are the topics that we're going to be...
These are the topics we're going to cover. So we're going to start out by just talking about our sense of ourselves. Then we've got a little exercise for that. I put together a little exercise for that. And then we'll go into our usual sequence of quotes on these four topics. We'll explore what is Morontia? What does that word mean? What does it point to? What is mota? Again, what does that word point to? What does the Urantia Book mean when it talks about mota? And then moving into applying this to our experience, our own individual experience of ourselves, that we can evolve into a Morontia sense of selfhood. And this is really our key to eternity, our ticket to survival into the next life, is our soul growth, our soul development. So soul and Morontia, as we're going through all this, kind of keep in mind that they're almost synonymous. So when we talk about Morontia realities, we're talking about soul realities. So Morontia is a very helpful concept because it helps us understand the nature of our soul growth, which is, again, this blending of the spiritual with the material. And then finally, we'll jump back to Jesus. He'll send us out with the realization that he is actually blazing the trail for us, that he's done this before us and shown us the way. So maybe we can go to this next slide.
Sure. Okay. So Chuck kind of put a little visualization exercise for something we can think about as we go through this.
Right. So in that opening slide where Jesus talks about the soil of our nature, that the soil of our evolving soul is human and material, but our destiny is spiritual. These two lists kind of represent that transformation. So the list on the left is where we begin. And it's like the soil for a plant. It's not to be denigrated. It's to be honored and recognized for its functional importance. But it's not our true identity. It's not our eternal identity. It's how we discover our existence. But then we have the opportunity to cultivate a higher understanding of who we are and actually develop that as a real reality. So this, I've been playing with these two lists in my own experience to see how they work, sort of testing them out, and this gets to the idea of the I am. So if you just kind of relax and think about, try to feel what it feels like to exist, right, as a person, that kind of gets into this I am feeling. But what are we? How do we answer that question? If somebody asks, well, what's wrapped up in this I am experience? And it begins over here in the left column where you feel like, okay, I have a body. I'm in my body. I can feel that. I have physical senses. They inform me of what's going on around me. And we have a self-awareness that's just part of our nature that's given through our mind and our personality. But we begin life not realizing that self-awareness can be expanded. It feels isolated. Many people, even as adults, feel isolated within themselves. And this is what we're trying to overcome and break out of with this understanding. And along with that, of course, we always have physical needs to take care of, and we have to work with external circumstances to make those things happen. So that's part of our training, part of our experience is to learn how to do those things. But we have the opportunity to lift all that to a new level, to reframe the givens of our existence, or our sense of I am, to, for example, be a son or daughter of God. If I go from saying, I'm just my body, that's very limiting. It's true. I mean, it's true that we have a body, but it's more true that we're a son or daughter of God. So to cultivate that realization and work with that in our thoughts is a very expanding and uplifting feeling, to realize that, wow, I'm related to the creator of reality. I mean, that's like, you think about the lineage, the genetics, or however you want to put that.
The inheritance.
The inheritance, right? Exactly. That we're actually related to God. So God's nature lives within us. So by realizing that we're a child of God, then we can begin to grow into that and explore what that means. So that goes along with cultivating an awareness of divine presence. So, we have divine presence enveloping us all the time, and not only enveloping us, but also living within us. So this inner presence of God gives us the opportunity to develop a companionship relationship with God within ourselves. In other words, we're not alone within ourselves. So that's a big, big, big realization. And it kind of takes the pressure off in a way that is, I don't know even how to describe it, but that's where the love comes in. That we're not just lonely and isolated and loveless within our own being. Even within our own being, there's the presence of divinity and the love that goes along with that. So then we begin to look for, that we can source our originality from that realization. And then finally, this inner presence of spirit has to do with values, our value perceptions. So when we evaluate decisions, what are the values we're bringing to bear? And the almost like a prism, the highest value is love. And that, just like light breaks into red, green, and blue, love breaks into truth, beauty, and goodness. So when we think about, okay, how do we bring divine values into play in a practical way in our lives, we can sort of meditate on or think about the importance of truth, beauty, and goodness, and try and manifest those qualities in our lives. And if we do the things on this right-hand list, we're going to be developing our Morontia identity. That's how we do it. It's an inevitable consequence of practicing.
Chuck just broke the code.
Broke the code. Yeah, all we got to do is the things on the right-hand list, and you'll start to grow your soul.
Now, I think the main thing about all of that is that doing.
Yeah.
is the main thing.
Right.
You must do.
Yeah.
You can't just agree with this.
Right. There's being and then there's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't let the fruit die and spoil on the vine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what divine motivation is all about, is our divine inheritance we're receiving, and then we're asked to share it.
Yeah. So we're excited about what we're becoming, but what we're becoming enables us to do more. We have a better grasp on the nature of reality, which means we become more, we can be more fruitful, like the fruits of the Spirit that comes up not only in the Bible, but also in the Urantia Book. These qualities of character that grow from our relationship with God are, often referred to as the fruits of the Spirit. And those are manifest in doing.
Right.
It's like how we treat other people, what we're doing in the world, our sense of purpose.
Well, you can,
all of that.
You can agree that farming will create produce. But just agreeing with that isn't going to get you produce.
Right. You
got to get dirty.
Got to actually get out there and sow the seeds.
Okay, well, we could rap for a while about this. Let me get into this first
But before we leave this, let me just mention, for future reference, you can pause the video and maybe do a screen grab of this if you want to perhaps use these ideas as part of a daily meditation even. I mean, I've been kind of working with that lately, and I really like how it feels. Cool. I feel like the feeling of where it's taking me. So
thanks, Chuck. And maybe we'll try to upload it to YouTube and Facebook also. Around there.
Yeah.
Now that we have 1,000 subscribers, we can have community posts.
Oh, nice.
So we can upload pictures and videos and stuff.
Cool.
Okay, so maybe just kind of get on track as to what is Morontia here?
Yes.
Okay. So let me just read this quote from the Urantia Book. Talking about Morontia. Your difficulty in arriving at a more harmonious coordination between science and religion is due to your utter ignorance of the intervening domain of the Morontia world of things and beings. The local universe consists of 3 degrees or stages of reality manifestation: matter, Morontia, and spirit. So that's kind of keen insight here. Normally you just, like it says, we're utterly ignorant because we kind of just think of body, mind, or matter and mind, and we haven't really figured out where spirit lies in this thing.
Right. Yeah, the people are stuck even on the mind-body problem without even getting to how that relates to spirit. But I like that there's an interesting almost double meaning here where it says the local universe consists of 3 stages. You can think of a stage as a period of development, or you can also think of it as a stage of action, like stepping out onto the stage.
Yeah.
And playing a role.
There are 3 venues that you're going to perform
3 venues. Right. We got 3 venues. And the Morontia is a very real one.
Yeah.
And that's what they're trying to tell us about. They're trying to so they've made up a new word. I mean, everybody's, I'm sure, noticed that Morontia is not in the dictionary.
Right.
It's not a word that's part of our evolved human understanding. It's a gift. This gifting of revealing Morontia reality is a gift that's given through the Urantia Book. And it's challenging to try to understand what it means. But the more we grow into it, the more real it becomes. And this is going to open up a whole new realm of development, I think, for human culture and civilization as this is more fully grasped.
Right. Yeah. And the people watching this, so just kind of bear with us as we break down the definition.
Just kind of hang in with us on this. And, it's going to grow in meaning the more we talk about it, the more we try to understand it, the more we try to feel it and be it, all of that. It's going to become more real, and that's going to have benefit. There's no way it can't have benefit, given the very nature of what it is. So when they talk about the harmonious coordination between science and religion, what they're talking about there is that science focuses on material reality, tries to understand what goes on the physical level. Religion is about trying to understand what's going on the spiritual level, right? And culturally, there's this big divide between science and religion. They're always, one is always trying to overtake the other in terms of having the final.
Currently.
In our current state.
Right.
Right. So there's been this split starting with the late 19th century, early 20th century, the split between science and religion has become like a major thing.
Okay.
So what they're saying here is that the reason it seems like there's this big gulf between them, or that they can't possibly be related or validated one to the other, right? That each one is always trying to invalidate the other.
Right.
What they're saying is, let's make peace between these two perspectives. And the fruit of that is going to be this new understanding of Morontia, which unifies science and religion. So that's kind of where we're going here.
The super philosophy.
Yeah, right. It's a meta perspective in a way that sees the meaning and value in everything.
Well, let me just get deeper in this.
Yeah, so let's go to the next one. Okay.
Yeah. So Morontia is a term designating a vast level intervening between the material and the spiritual. The warp of Morontia is spiritual. Its woof is physical. I'm just going to read the next one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mortal man lacks the concept of Morontia mind and material, and revelation is the only technique for atoning for this deficiency. So that's kind of what we're doing here. We've got revelation. We're sharing it here with you, that we got this term and how we work it out here. So this first concept is, if you could think of this intervening arena between material and spirit, and in there is like a how do I say, like a training realm or training sphere. So you don't go from just flesh to full-blown spirit.
Right, right.
Just like you don't go from not having a driver's license to having a driver's license, you might need a learner's permit, right? So then we get this Morontia type of existence in our soul. So a soul, which is our next development, is a Morontia type of existence. Not fully spirit, but Morontia. It's the learner's permit of spirit.
Right. It's a blending. Right. And it has a lot to do with identity. So your identity, how you think of yourself. So that's those two lists in that exercise slide are kind of about that. It's like, how do you identify yourself? How do you think of yourself? What are you? You know, and the more you bring spirit into it, the more Morontia we become. So this idea of the warp and the woof, that's a metaphor from weaving. You know, so you have threads going in one direction, and then you have threads going at right angles, and you interweave them, and then that creates fabric. And the fabric is not something you would ever guess could exist just by looking at two spools of thread, right? But when you take those threads and you interweave them on a loom or however you do that, then you have fabric. Then you have something you can wear. It'll keep you warm. You can make clothes out of it. You can do all kinds of things out of it. Yeah. And it's a reality unto itself. That fabric is a reality that goes beyond the two threads that weave together to make it. So Morontia's like that. We interweave the physical with the spiritual, and that creates a whole new thing.
It's truly creative.
Truly creative. Yeah, it originates a new kind of reality. So that's what we're pointing to here and trying to get a grip on conceptually, but also experientially, in order to feel it, in order to really be in it and identify with it.
Yeah, part of this is kind of interesting because, you know, whenever there's dialogue about feeling spiritual presence or energies or whatever, everyone's got their own experiences. But when we talk about true spiritual creativity, regardless of whatever your deep feelings are, like your physical sensations are, there's true fruit in the creative product that comes out of that. When you go into the well, are you pulling out new fresh water and everyone can see it? Or is it just stank water that's been there for a while? You know?
Well, you mentioned like art and music earlier. I mean, art and music, they're good examples of Morontia. And if you think about it, it's like you paint a painting and you bring value into that painting. You try and make it beautiful. You would never guess that a beautiful painting could come from tubes of paint. Right. So there's a blending of the spiritual intention with the physical material to create an artifact that expresses something that's a combined reality.
Yeah.
And it's the same with music, listening to music.
It's same. And I think one thing that I would like to reinforce throughout this whole study is that while we talk about creativity and we talk about art and we talk about artists doing things, I think it's important that divine motivation and inspiration can bring creativity and newness in any little thing.
Oh, yeah.
That's why you can serve the highest purpose in any mundane little situation, because true creativity is loving. So you're bringing in the love of God in a creative way that brings smiles, that brings joy, that brings whatever is needed in that moment through you. It doesn't mean you have to go get published in some magazine.
Right. Life can be an art.
Yeah.
Just becoming the better person can be an art.
Your soul is the art.
Is an art. Yeah. They say it's the apex of cosmic art. Is the human blending of the human and the divine. So Jesus is our master artist in that sense. And we can look to him for inspiration as we do this each in our own way. It's like none of us are going to be Jesus. We're going to be ourselves, but we have the gifts to create a version of ourselves that is close, godlike, just like he was.
Yeah. And his spirit will work with our spirit to show you, hey, look at that. Look at that. This is the way you do this.
Right.
This is the way.
Yeah.
And I think, we're talking about inspiration, and we're talking about mota here and motivation. And maybe we could just talk about kind of the sensitivity to mota, maybe not so much now.
Well, that'll come up in these.
Yeah, in these other ones.
Yeah.
In this next slide, really, because I feel like the experience of when dealing with creativity is something that I would like to get into with this mota and inspiration and motivation.
Right.
And so that feeling of being inspired, getting that picturization in your mind, like, oh, hey, maybe if I take those two tubes of paint together and mix them, I can draw a tree or whatever. You know what I mean? That creative insight
and
that
intuition
wasn't there before.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Spirit working within the mind to get us excited about a possibility that we can conceive of that doesn't exist yet. And when it blends the spirit with the material, then we're getting into the territory we're talking about here.
Yeah. Artful living.
Yeah. Right. And becoming even ourselves.
Yeah.
And how we, live and treat others and all of that. All of that is sort of a work of art. You think about it. Artful living.
Yeah.
Creative living, original living, where we tap into
new and
where we tap into our truest nature within ourselves.
Yeah.
Not just imitate and repeat something that's outside of ourselves, but originate from within.
And you see the development in the child. They'll imitate and repeat for a while until eventually there's this own voice that can come out.
They practice. Man, do they practice. And they practice by imitation. You're right. Yeah. And it's so cute how they do that.
All right. Well, let me read this one about mota.
Okay.
So mota is a super material reality sensitivity. And that's why I talk about motivation.
Yeah.
Because it's like we're not in soul form fully, but we can get some kind of like a little bit of that soul power, right?
Yeah.
So that feeling, I feel like, for me, is me getting the true motivation of soul creativity. And that's part of this mota perspective.
It's like a higher motivation.
Right.
Yeah. It's a transcendent motivation.
And getting to work with that, knowing how to recognize it so that it separates. But now, after all this study, knowing that, okay, is this new or is this just rearranging the old? Is this coming from a well of depth that is serving the greatest amount of good? Is my intention to serve creatively and lovingly when I'm trying to draw this creativity? And then just the fact that now I have the trust that when I ask, I will receive the creativity too.
Right. Well, this is all born out of our relationship with God.
Yeah.
If we hang out with God, we're going to become more godlike.
Yeah.
It just happens naturally because we fall in love with God and we want to be like God. This divine nature or we experience with the Spirit of Truth too and learn about through Jesus is so adorable, so appealing, so attractive that we just wow, I want that. I want more of that.
Yeah. And don't be disheartened if you didn't know about it, because this next quote, always in the absence of revelation, or in the failure to accept or grasp it, revelation, has mortal man resorted to his futile gesture of metaphysics.
Right.
So this is the fact that, I mean, this is like children's attempt to fill in the blank that Morontia
fill in the
in.
gap.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's a human recognition of this gap in our understanding of how the physical and the spiritual are connected, how they come from the same source, even. That's not obvious. So metaphysics evolves as a human attempt to explain how reality works, but it's always going to be more or less erroneous compared to revelation, which is actually revealing reality.
Yeah. The challenge with metaphysics is that it never reveals the personality behind all of this creation.
Right. Yeah.
It's never accounted for.
Yeah.
There's never mind in the equation.
Yeah. I mean, metaphysics can be fascinating, and it's just like we got a whole bookshelf here of that's filled with metaphysics in a way. The human attempts at understanding, and that again, like the soil of our existence that we come from, is not to be denigrated. It's a honorable attempt, but the gift of revelation helps us to see the connection between the material and the spiritual in a way that we can't really figure out on our own.
Yeah. And one of those realizations of seeing that is that it's endless and limitless.
Yeah.
And I think one of the human challenges is, like, through metaphysics, is that we always try to come to a happy little ending and keep everything contained within a container. So metaphysics does it. It's all in there.
Yeah.
It's in the quantum field. And that's just how it's like an AI thing that's self-programming. And there's no mind. And okay, what's next? But when you really discover true spiritual creativity and service in the kingdom, that's not going to end.
Right.
That doesn't stop.
That's just the beginning.
The flow of creativity doesn't stop, and the life growth and your evolution doesn't stop.
Right.
So buckle in.
Right.
Go for a ride.
Yeah. It springs up from within.
Yeah.
The waters of inspiration, that Jesus talked about.
Yeah. Always renewing.
Always renewing. Right. So that's part of where we can go with this, is to actually experience that and realize that we're not there's no dead end streets in the universe, in our opportunities to serve and our personal growth and development.
Always there is a way. Okay. So this last one about mota, it's kind of like what we're talking about here. Science, knowledge leads to fact, consciousness. Religion, experience leads to value, consciousness. Revelation, the substitute for Morontia mota, leads to the consciousness of true reality.
Right.
Mota is to philosophy as two eyes are to one. It has a stereoscopic effect on meanings and values. So it's very interesting how a lot of us are maybe not quite as blind as Josiah there, but maybe with covering one eye the whole time and not able to really see the full panoramic perspective.
Especially in a secular culture.
Yeah.
Like that is so dominant right now. Yeah. Where the physical level seems like the only reality that that has any significance. The science is trying to explain everything through material experiments, and that's a kind of a blindness. It's like you're saying, it's like looking at reality through one eye. Because where do values come from? Values don't come from collisions of atoms and molecules. You can't weigh a value on a scale or look at it through a microscope. But values are in some ways more real than the physical things because they determine our decisions. It determines the path of our lives, how things unfold and how we grow and develop. It's guided by values. So values are actually more real in that sense. But they become real as they're expressed.
Right.
And that's where we get this hybrid reality. of the material and the physical, because we're living physical lives.
Yeah, the power of demonstration is so important because as your values become real in your own life
Mm-hmm.
and you're demonstrating them, people observing them in you, the ripple effect of that righteousness
There's
is
a
really
recognition,
important.
Yeah. Again, it's like, oh, I want that.
Yeah, the spirit of truth will work with you right there.
Yeah, right. It brings coherence.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing about the Morontia concept. It brings coherence to the significance of the physical and the spiritual. They're both important, but they blend to create this new reality, and that makes them both manifest on a higher level of coherence.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And also, just one other thing in that sentence where they almost define religion as experience. I think that's really super fascinating. They say religion, experience, leads to value consciousness.
Yeah.
So it's our experiences that really awaken our value consciousness because of how our experiences turn out. And they often don't turn out quite like we'd like them to. So there's a reach for higher values to improve the quality of our experiences. In a sense, they're saying that's essentially the essence of religion.
Yeah, the sincerely lived out.
Right.
Your values lived out and expressed sincerely.
Right.
And then the attempt to always grow in that open and teachable mind.
Right. But in a material body, on a material level, we also have to master the material things.
Right.
And we have to know how to start the car. We have to know how to keep in our lane. You know what I mean? If we don't have these basic scientific skills for engaging with material reality, our life's going to be a disaster. So, but that's not the highest meaning of our lives. We use that as a platform then to realize the higher values that go along with relationships. So love and relationships and growing in relationships and what can be done in partnership and companionship is a whole higher level of manifestation that's involved in with these ideas, I think.
Yeah, all tied in with the soul.
Yeah, all tied in with the soul.
You want to read this next one?
Sure. Okay, so now we're going to get into the this whole realm, this whole idea, this whole concept of our selfhood, what it means to be a human self, and taking that beyond the physical level into the Morontia level. So here they say that the soul of man is an experiential acquirement. And by experiential, there's sort of almost a double meaning there. Partly it means it grows through our experience, but it also means that it has a beginning in time. So unlike deity, which is past eternal, we have a origination in time.
Starting point.
We have a starting point in time. So that word there kind of has two meanings. So our soul begins in time, and it's an acquirement. It's something we acquire through experience.
Like in the soil of time.
In time in a physical body, a material existence. As a mortal creature chooses to, quote, do the will of the Father in heaven, so the indwelling spirit becomes the father of a new reality in human experience. The mortal and material mind is the mother of this same emerging reality. The substance of this new reality is neither material nor spiritual. It is morontial. So we have this mind, that's rooted in a material body. We have physical brains that are designed to connect to the mind circuits that are gifted by the Mother Spirit. So our consciousness, our thinking ability, our capacity for logical thought, all of that, all of our mind functions are rooted in a physical mechanism, even though they transcend it in a sense. But what they're talking about here is in our minds, we have this living spirit presence of the Father guiding us and inspiring us, giving us picturizations of destiny, they say, things like that. So as we act on that, then we're creating a new kind of reality. We're doing the warp and the woof. We're creating a fabric that is neither mind nor spirit by itself, but a blended reality.
Well, I love how they talk about how the mortal mind is the mother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
where is it? Yeah. The mortal and material mind is the mother of this same emerging reality. And that's why I feel like inspiration, you're impregnated with inspiration.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
It just comes in and boom.
Yeah.
And then you're asked to act.
Right. Well, and no small coincidence that our mind is a gift of the universe mother spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the sort of the mother side of the equation. And then we have our choosing. They say, as the mortal creature chooses to do the will of the Father in heaven, then the spirit of the Father that lives within us is able to become manifest in our nature. It requires our choices, choosing to do that and acting on it.
Sincerity.
It's the sincerity of our choice of desiring to do the will of the Father in heaven. Then we get a blending of that value level with the mind arena, which is kind of the soil or the stage wherein all this happens. And this new kind of reality can be born. And that is otherwise referred to as our soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's our soul that takes us to the next world, that gets us off the planet.
And it's like just this natural progression of what we've been studying about this development of
Mm-hmm.
I am and the soul and what it means to grow your soul, essentially. And
right.
Here we're talking about connecting with your soul and creating through your soul, with your soul.
Being your soul.
Yeah. Actually identifying through soul power.
Yeah. Where your soul becomes your new identity.
Mm-hmm.
It replaces identification with the body.
Mm-hmm.
You transition into identifying with your soul.
And it's your soul.
Yeah.
It's channeled somebody's soul or some past life guy.
It's our own project.
It's your soul.
Yeah. Each of us has our own project. Growing your soul is like a personal project.
Yeah. You got a lot of work, my friend. Get to work. Don't do somebody else's work. You got your own soul work to get.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, too, is having introduced this concept of Morontia, the Urantia Book really puts no limit on our capacity for soul development, even during this lifetime.
Yeah, now. Now we can go. And that's the beauty of having revelation.
Uh-huh.
Is that we're privileged.
It points
that we have this opportunity to do these things, to act upon these things.
Right.
And that kind of, I'm going to go off on a quick little tangent because it'll go into your next one. Is just having privilege, like from my experience, having revelation or having opportunity to act on my motivation and inspirations is really what has led to my personal sense of self, because not the privilege itself, but the acting upon it and blending all of it together has allowed me to then look back upon what have I acted upon from inspiration and manifested things that would never be on this planet had I not chosen to do that.
Right.
And so it's a gift to be revealed things, and don't let them spoil, because the guilt and regret that comes with that of spoiled inspiration or unmanifested gifts can really start to break down in identity. Right.
Well, that's where you would say, I am someone who acts on inspiration, as an I am concept. Identify yourself that way, that I act on the inspiration of spirit within me, that defines me and directs me, and to receive that and accept that and embrace it and become it is kind of what we're talking about here. And you're right. If you ignore that, if you just let it go to waste, you're just going to be a lump of flesh, right? And we know our bodies are eventually going to deteriorate and return to dust, as they say. And if you haven't grown something that transcends your physical existence, there's not going to be anything there when you die. There won't be anything there to take to the next world.
Dust to dust.
Right.
But plus, soul energy while you're here is quite enlivening and youthful.
Oh, yeah.
It brings youth.
Right.
Just look at Chuck. He's 120.
Yeah, it's still going. Still creaking along here.
No, but we share lots of laughs over here,
Yeah.
The joy of the spirit is strong.
Absolutely. Okay, shall we go to the next one? Okay. So now they're talking about this transfer of identity, which is what that exercise slide was about. The transitioning from physical identity to Morontia identity, which we have the opportunity to do. And we've kind of been shown how to do that. So this, according to this quote, the actual transfer from material association to Morontia identification is affected by the sincerity, persistence, and steadfastness of the God-seeking decisions of the human creature. So this transfer of our sense of identity from our physical material existence over to our Morontia identity, that is a natural growth, a natural result of sincerely and persistently and steadfastly seeking God in our decisions. So there's a lot of sort of key points in that short statement, but decisions are a big part of this process.
Your decisions build your soul.
Our decisions build our soul, but in particular, our God-seeking decisions.
Right.
So the God-seeking also, when we talk about spirit, we're always talking about values. So seeking truth, seeking beauty, seeking goodness, trying to become those values, express them in our lives. That's part of this because God shows us how to do that. Because God is all those things. Those are sort of the manifestable qualities of divinity, or truth, beauty, and goodness. So by being sensitive to those values and being dedicated to bringing them into expression through our lives is part of God seeking. And that's what they're talking about here. So that's what makes this exciting. Not only do we get this whole new vehicle for our identity, but we also get a great relationship with God in the bargain. Yeah, an inner friend, inner companion. So the other part to this is as you are the human parent, this echoes one of the earlier quotes, but in a little different twist, says, as you are the human parent, so is the adjuster, the divine parent. That's the presence of the Father within us. The divine parent of the real you, your higher and advancing self, your better, morontial and future spiritual self. So there's a grand sweep to what they're talking about here, because we eventually evolve into spirit beings, purely spirit beings, but that's way off in the future. Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, we have this, like you're saying, it's sort of a training wheels version of ourselves that evolves into the next worlds, the mansion worlds that we, experience after this world. And all of that is about continuing this growth, continuing this development, where we're co-parenting with God, our real self.
Yeah. And I like how, maybe in the New Age metaphysic world, they might talk about my higher self, right?
Yeah, that's a real thing.
And here's what we're building here is your higher self.
You're right.
The real you. Mm-hmm. And then that added upon what we were talking about earlier is how Jesus sees you. The real you.
Right.
Your potentials.
Right.
How you're going to serve the many throughout eternity.
Yeah, they say just his smile. Just if he looked at you and
you're like, I am going to do that.
Right. People would be transformed just by him smiling on them, because he sees our potential beyond what we can see.
Yeah.
And the same is true with God, of course, with the Father.
Yeah. And I think that this is also, I think it's important to share here that part of the ministry and loving creativity in worship and checking in with God sincerely is consoling and comforting too. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of brokenhearted people out there, and they might not be thinking, okay, well, I need to be creative. But part of creativity is this truth, beauty, and goodness, which is love. Mm-hmm. And the love that is received and consoled, it's the love of a parent that knows that it's going to be okay, that you don't need to worry so much in your mind, and that all will be okay because I see you and I believe in you and you're related to me.
Right.
And you've got my creative blood in you.
Right.
And I believe in you.
All you have to do is realize that. Realize our lineage. So this idea of being a son of or daughter, child of God is so profound in that sense. Even Jesus, while he was on the planet, said, if you accept this idea, you will have eternal life.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't depending on him dying or how he died. It's depending on us just receiving that understanding and through faith
and living accordingly,
living that realization through faith.
Yeah.
So turning to God as a parent.
Well, I always, there's one of these big realizations with this particular study for me was realizing being related to God as a child of God. And, maybe growing up Roman Catholic with all the atonement and the talk of the blood of Christ,
mm-hmm.
and the new and everlasting covenant. And to me, it's like this new and everlasting well of creativity because of my relatedness with God,
mm-hmm.
because of spirit.
Yeah.
Ancient man might call it blood, but I call it love, and it's spirit creative love that I share in my veins with God.
Right.
And so we're in the same family because of that.
Right. It's part of our nature. Yeah. If we receive it and accept it and recognize it and develop it and exercise it. It's just like Kitty does here.
Kitty feels it.
Yeah. So I like this idea of the real you.
Yeah.
That emerges over time in partnership with spirit.
Right.
And that's kind of the path we're talking about here. And Morontia is the term that we can now use to talk about that. I'm feeling a little more Morontia today.
Yeah.
than I did yesterday.
Yeah. Because of this study, I've been thinking about having a little bit more Morontia insight, Morontia motivation, Morontia thinking.
Getting that stereoscopic view where we're not just looking at things, we're also looking at values.
Yeah.
And we interpret the things by the values that we bring to bear.
Right. And part of the value for me, or one of my values, is newness.
Mm-hmm. Right. Originality.
Yeah, originality.
We're gifted with, the adjuster presence of the Father, that's original reality.
Mm-hmm.
And our personalities are also of original nature. So we've got a conspiracy of originality in our very nature if we choose to grow that in relation to God. So
let's go over the example of Jesus.
Okay, so here we have Jesus. He blazes the trail. That's what it says in a couple of places. So this, I think, is really super interesting in terms of what we're talking about here with Morontia being a blending of material and spiritual. So they say about Jesus that the great mistake that has been made by those who have studied the Master's life is that some have conceived of him as entirely human, while others have thought of him as only divine. Throughout his entire experience, he was truly both human and divine, even as he yet is. So that last little phrase there is so super crucial because he is with us through the Spirit of truth.
Mm-hmm.
And he is human and he is divine. He lived a human life. He knows all about what it means to be human. And he's also a paradise son of God. So he's fully divine. So he's both. And by hanging out with him, by getting to know him, by understanding his life, understanding his teachings, understanding how friendly he was and how loving he was and supportive, and everything about him is such an ideal example of this idea of blending the human and divine, because that's what he is.
Absolutely. A living example of it all.
Right. So he is sort of the Morontia standard.
Yeah.
In a way.
He is a Morontia standard. And it's so funny how it talks about the great mistake has been of that humans can't really grok either he's all human or he's all God.
Right.
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 And it's so funny how we started this study about the utter ignorance between religion and science.
Right. There's this gap.
Right. So there's the same gulf of understanding
right.
that humans don't have, and they need revelation to fill it in. Well, dun, 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 shows up Jesus. Here's Jesus now.
Right.
Is this living demonstration of revelation for us.
So we can kind of see that in Christianity, where the focus has been more on the kind of the divine Christ, you might say, as a divine being.
Right.
and kind of overlooking the guy who was out treading the trails from, Jerusalem to Capernaum and hanging out with these guys and fishing and building boats and
Well, I was just
doing
thinking,
all this very
man,
human stuff.
Well, as you're saying that, I just think about they're going from a fear and the awe of the divine being to actual motivation and inspiration from the human.
Right.
And the spiritualized revelation human, this blended human.
Right.
So that's like the way the human did it is divine. And the demonstration of mixing it the way that he did it, is the Morontia way.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So if we look at him exclusively as this sort of divine metaphysical entity or something, we completely lose track of how he can be a human inspiration.
An example for us.
Right.
Yeah.
But on the other, if we go too far on the other way and just as some do, just look at him as a historic figure, the more secular view of Jesus, well, he was just this guy, a moral teacher or whatever, then you overlook the fact that he actually was God in human form. And again, that would cut us off from grasping or realizing that we can be like him. So that's kind of the thing about Jesus. He's the way, the truth, and the life. We can be like him. We can't be him, but we can be like him and draw our inspiration for that the same way he did.
He's in the same family. We're
all in the same family.
Blood.
Right.
We're all creators.
Right.
Especially us. It's kind of like our it is our nature to create in loving ways.
Right.
Because God is the creator of all. And we're a child of God.
Right.
So guess what? We create. That's what we do.
Yeah. This whole lineage coming down from the Father and the Son, like through Jesus being a creator son, is about creating, like you're saying. And then there's this whole other lineage of beings that come down from the infinite spirit, which are like the angels and the ministering spirits. So all these daughters of God coming down, the angels coming down from the infinite spirit, they minister to us as creators. So they help us, right? There's this beautiful complemental relationship between the sons of God and the daughters of God in Urantia Book terms, or between the, personalities, gifted, first source personalities and third source. It sounds a little obscure, but there are these two types of beings that are complemental. There's the sons of God like us, which includes women, of course, who are the doers, makers of making things happen. And then we're assisted and guided and nurtured and ministered to by the angels, by the daughters of God. So it's this beautiful complementary relationship that we also see in our local universe parent. Michael is a creator son with the universe mother spirit, and that they have the same complemental relationship. So complemental relationships are a big part of the dynamics of personal reality in the universe.
It's pretty dynamic and complex because we were just talking about the complemental relationship of us being the mother, our mind being the mother of this complemental relationship with God.
Right. That's an example of that.
The creative birth that comes from that.
Right.
The soul.
Our soul is born from a complemental relationship.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right.
All right. Well, you got
Let's
another.
see. We got. All right. So let's go to the next one. These are two short but sweet, very helpful statements. So first, they say that Jesus, and I love how they talk about this. Jesus is the spiritual lens in human likeness, which makes visible to the material creature him who is invisible. So God obviously is invisible. We can't see God. We can feel the presence of God, but we can't see God. So Jesus makes God visible through his divinity, that he was God in human form. So he makes this divine presence visible in that sense. We can look at him. If we could go back to watch him, just study him as he went through day-to-day life, we would see a divine expression in human form. And of course, part 4 of the Urantia Book gives us a lot of detail on that, which is so helpful in terms of getting to know him in a real real way, where we appreciate both the human and the divine aspect of his nature.
Absolutely.
So in that sense, he's like a lens, a spiritual lens in human likeness. And then this other comment, as we get to know Jesus, they say, through the appropriation of the faith of Jesus, mortal man can foretaste in time the realities of eternity.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. So that in a way kind of echoes that quote back on that first slide where he's saying that, we grow from material soil, but our destiny is spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah.
So his faith and, his faith in God, how he lived his life in faith is, again, kind of is an inspiration and an example. So if we can learn about that, sort of get to begin to understand what that means just by knowing him, then we can get a foretaste, they're saying, a foretaste in time, even in a material body, of the realities of eternity.
Yeah.
So our soul is potentially eternal reality. So that's what the soul is.
Exactly.
It's eternal, whereas our body is not. So to make that transition and to taste that possibility is just so like, wow, okay, let's get on with it.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Yeah. And he's the truth. And it doesn't hurt to ask the truth to come and cleanse your vision, heal your blindness, like that first slide that we had of Josiah being healed from his blindness. That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about. Yeah. Giving sight to the blind.
Yeah.
Spiritual sight. Yeah. Where we can get a glimpse of our destiny.
Yeah. Connect with our soul.
Yeah. Get
to know our soul.
Yeah. Look forward to an eternity of life and exploration and adventure in the universe.
Cool. Well, okay. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Everyone else?
Taking baby steps.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Indeed.
Please like and subscribe if you haven't. And I know these are kind of long, but these are good studies, and hopefully they'll show that throughout time.
Yeah.
So Absolutely. Thanks again, Chuck.
Yeah. And thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
We'll be back with more.
All right.